So after I posted my video on Red Dead Revolver, a few of you recommended the game Gun.
Let him have it.
I never played this game back in the day, but it clearly has a fond following of people who loved it, and since I'm kind of on a Western kick right now, I thought I'd give it a shot, and man, am I sure glad that I did. Also, want to give a big shout out to Carter at Mr. Carter Fields on Twitter for providing information from an interview that he did with the game's writer, Randall Jahnson. He gave some great insight on the development of this game, some cut content that was supposed to be in this game, and insider scoop information on if we'll ever see a sequel to Gun, all included in this video. So thank you again, Carter. Real quick before we jump in, my good friends over at GOG have offered a steep discount on Gun just for you guys. 72% off if you use the discount code in the description. Whether you've played the game before and want to revisit it, or you want to check it out for the first time like me, this is a tremendous deal for the next 10 days only, so get it while it's hot. Gun is an action-adventure western game that was released by Neversoft and Activision in November of 2005 for the PlayStation 2, Xbox, GameCube, and PC. Less than a year after Red Dead Revolver hit the shelves, which also gave it the benefit of dropping on some new hardware, namely the Xbox 360, ultimately becoming one of the launch titles for that console. The game also came out for the PSP as Gun Showdown, a slightly altered version of the game. The thing about Gun that really impressed me was the sheer amount of detail laid down in the game. Nearly every character, gun, and location in the game is based on some sort of real-life counterpart from the true Old West. Gun, like most Western tales, takes place on the old frontier, namely areas like Arizona, Colorado, Kansas, Montana, and New Mexico, in the year of 1880. And unlike Red Dead Revolver, this game functions as an open-world experience, letting you ride through hostile badlands, grassy plains filled with buffalo, and a couple of towns, one of them being Dodge, being based on the real foundation of Dodge City, Kansas, and the other being Empire City, the foundational roots of the city where the game Infamous takes place many years later. I'm joking, obviously. Trekking across this open world landscape, you certainly encounter a wide variety of people, both friendly and foe, that are just bursting with personality, and as stated before, are usually based on some sort of historical figure from the real Old West. And the cast that they got on board to voice these characters is super impressive, even by modern standards. Big names like Ron Perlman, Chris Christopherson, Lance Henriksen, Tom Skerritt, and Thomas Jane taking the lead role. On top of meeting and talking to all these interesting characters, in typical open world fashion, there's a bunch of shit to do. You got your bounty hunting, your gold mining, your game hunting, your poker tournaments. You can piss off a whole town. You even got this little patience meter and everything, where if it fills up, it causes a showdown where a bunch of armed men come and try to stop you. And then once you kill them all, you can immediately go to the town sheriff and get offered deputy work, because man, there's just too many shenanigans going on in this town. This game truly is one of the first great Western games ever made. It did everything Red Dead Redemption did to the genre only 5 years earlier. It's a game that I missed all those years ago, and from the sound of it, people who played it absolutely loved it. So let's take some time to give a proper look at Gun, Neversoft's Western epic. There is quite a lot to unpack in this game, so let's just take it step by step, starting with Neversoft's conception of the project. Around the time when Neversoft decided to work on a new IP, they were known pretty much for only Tony Hawk games, and one of the greatest Spider-Man games ever made. The opportunity arose for them to start branching out and working on something new, and at the time of conception, no one was really doing Western stuff in video games. Red Dead Revolver was still in development, and every other game to touch the genre was little more than on-the-rails shooters. So Neversoft really paved the way when it came to narrative Western video games. The idea for an edgier, more narrative look at the genre actually came from the HBO show Deadwood. They really wanted to show the down and dirty nature of the Old West while also appealing to a more mature audience, so that they didn't have to sugarcoat anything and were able to focus on writing a truly sophisticated storyline without holding any punches. I personally think the game has a big Blood Meridian vibe, the Cormac McCarthy novel. Of course, due to the violence, but also the creepy, ominous preacher and, well, scalping. The early 2000s in gaming wasn't a time where a lot of players played games for the stories. Yeah, a lot of games had some pretty great plot lines and narratives, but the gameplay had to be the focus in most cases. Neversoft knew this and needed to consider that when trying to embark on telling what they wanted to be a large and sprawling epic. They wanted players to appreciate the story and to not simply skip through cutscenes without shooting. This is what drove them to seek out writer Randall Jahnson, the guy who wrote Dudes, The Mask of Zorro, and The Doors. But what really sold Neversoft on hiring Jahnson was a script that he wrote that took place in the early days of America, right after the Revolution. It was about a white boy who was kidnapped by the Indians in Kentucky and taken across the river into Ohio, and raised as a Miami warrior. Janssen's authenticity and historical accuracy in the script is what sealed the deal on Neversoft signing him onto the project. Randall had never worked on a video game before, but he was stoked on the process and idea of it all because he has a personal love for Western epics and wanted to be a part of it. And even though there were some creative hurdles, like writing for an explorative open world rather than a linear screenplay for a movie, he knocked it out of the park, especially when it came to the main story and the cutscenes, which the president of Neversoft had put the fear of God into him about when saying that players can skip them.
Joel took me aside at one point and put a controller into my hands, and he said, "See that button with a little X on it?" He said, "That's the enemy. You've got to imagine that there's a player sitting on that thing with his finger on that button like a gunslinger on his trigger."
Jahnson dug deep into real-life history rather than fictional sources for the game's plot, studying interesting characters in the Old West like mountain men such as Jedediah Smith, John Coulter, and Liver-Eating Johnson, Native American leaders like Crazy Horse, and whole tribes in general like the Blackfeet. He was also particularly interested in syndicate-like lawmen who had their hand deep within money from both gambling and prostitution, particularly Hoodoo Brown, a real-life character who is also very present within the game of Gun. The actual development of the game wasn't much easier than the writing process for Neversoft. They had to make everything from the ground up because, well, Tony Hawk ain't no cowboy. They had to make new worlds and textures for everything on top of a new game engine that functions as a shooter with more advanced AI that can react to the player differently whether he's walking around waving a gun or charging at them on horseback. It was stated as one of the most difficult things when making this game, but it's something else that I think they knocked out of the park. The level of care and detail in developing this game was just phenomenal. From motion capturing every single cutscene and set piece, as well as the entirety of the protagonist's actions, to getting exact replica guns of the real Old West weapons in the game to shoot and sound test for realistic looking and sounding action in the game. Neversoft truly turned this into a passion project, and it really shows. Even the voice talent that they got on the game all had strong passion for the game and the Western genre. Lance Henriksen and Brad Dourif, who played Magruder and the Preacher respectively, both have massive respect for the Western genre and the writing of this particular story by Randall Jahnson. And of course, Thomas Jane, who had just finished work on the video game The Punisher prior to working on Gun, and has found a love for video games as a medium and really puts his all into his voice work.
Blood will spill no matter where the sun hits the earth, until justice is served.
Gun is one of those rare cases where trying to be a jack of all trades doesn't go wrong. They wanted the story to be fantastic, the cinematics to be visually impressive and acted wonderfully, the gameplay to be non-repetitive, interesting, and entertaining, the characters to seem deep and real and to come alive through the game, the environments to pop and feel like a part of the real world. All these things, big and small, were meticulously designed and perfected by Neversoft, and they just didn't fucking miss. this. Most developers sacrifice gameplay focus to put the story forward, or vice versa, or put time into this mechanic or that, but Neversoft had all these ideas and innovations that they wanted to do, and they wanted to do them all extremely well, and they did.
Keep the change.
The gameplay of Gun revolves around the open world setting of the game. Like I said earlier, there are a variety of locations to ride up to and do various different side activities. Most of these side quests are, however, pretty bare bones. The simplest of which would be the gold veins, found throughout the environment. Once you buy a pickaxe from a merchant, you're able to stroll up to these gold veins and hit it a few times, netting you about 10 bucks. It's a simple collectible really, and it's an easy way to get some money, which is good, because unless you're knocking out a bunch of side missions, money really ain't that easy to come by. For example, another type of side quest is bounty hunting. There are these wanted posters scattered around, name dropping some bad boys for you to bring in dead or alive, which I'll go ahead and say it functions 10 times better than Red Dead Revolver, where all of the bounties, aside from Mr. Black, say dead or alive, but there is no way to actually capture people and bring them in alive. In Gun, there is, and the bounty changes depending on how you bring them in. It might be 10 bucks for dead, but $15 for alive, because subduing the bounty without killing them isn't that easy, so a few extra bucks makes the effort worth it. With that being said, it makes you appreciate the gold ore mining, because you literally get $10 for a few pokes at a rock compared to the same cast for substantially more work. There are some other missions to take part in though. There are these poker tournaments, which are literally just poker mini games. There are Pony Express missions where you ride across town to deliver something. The timers on these are fucking insane though. There's this fat dude right here who wants his food from the merchant, right? He's literally within eyesight. Okay, no sweat, easy peasy. Oh, by the way, you have 3.7 seconds to get that shit back to me. Like, these timers were so fast for no reason. There are various other things to get into all throughout the game. None of it is all too substantial, just some small side content that really functions as a minigame and gives you some cash and boosts a handful of stats. Also, throughout the game, you can get run up on by bandits when just riding around and minding your business. They usually aren't a problem though.
Give it up nice and easy.
The meat and potatoes of the game comes from the main missions, where you really get to experience the combat of the game. Gun is at its core a third-person shooter, and it does it well. And I have to say, the selection of weapons in this game is pretty impressive. Not by the quantity, but by the quality. You start the game off with a simple revolver, the Colt 1851 Navy, and a rifle, the Winchester Model 1866. But as you go through the missions, you get more and more weapons to use and to kill all of those people that oppose you. You get new pistols to play with, like the Volcanic pistol, or dual Colt single actions that you take off of Mr. Hoodoo Brown. You get a few more rifles like Ned's Ferguson rifle or the Sharp's 1874 sniper rifle that can easily remove limbs with its 45-70 government rounds. And its upgraded brother, the Winchester 1885 high wall, chambering in the same round. Shotguns also come into play with the Winchester Model 1887 and the Remington 1878, both of which pack a punch that you want from a good video game shotgun. And after you complete the game, you get Magruder's Knock Gun, an insane prototype firearm that is an 8-barreled shotgun with incredible power. Other than these traditional firearms, you also get a few different bows to use that can be equipped with fun arrow types like arrows lit on fire or arrows strapped with dynamite, as well as throwables like firebombs and dynamite and melee weapons that are way too overpowered, especially the saber. A few story points in this game also gives you access to some big boys like Gatling guns and howitzer cannons, which are of course a lot of fun. Although the cannon is a bit tough to aim correctly as you don't get a reticle for whatever reason, so you're just kind of doing some quick trigonometry in your head to make sure that you kill the guys that you're shooting at before you get murked. In fact, in probably the most frustrating level in the game, when you're going through the mine at the end, I would constantly just jump off of the cannon to kill everyone before moving forward, because being a sitting duck on that thing was a death sentence 9 times out of 10. On top of increasing your stats for the guns with side missions, you're also able to purchase specific upgrades for gun types, like speed loaders for pistols or bored barrels for the rifles for much more damage. One of the more unique things about the combat comes in the form of the game's own bullet time mechanic, where you slow time slightly and whip out your revolvers in a first-person perspective to pop off some rapid-fire shots. It's not quite the same as how the Red Dead games function. You aren't laying down markers and then letting the shots fly after. You're shooting in real time while the world just kind of slows around you, and it's not even slowed all that much. If people are coming at you on horseback, you need to be pretty quick, even in the bullet time, to take them out. Or if you're trying to shoot bundles of dynamite thrown at you, your time window is pretty short on landing your shots. Speaking of landing your shots, the blood and gore effect are pretty cool as well. Headshots result in pieces of skull popping off the enemy's head, and a well-placed round from a sharpshooter can completely remove a limb. The combat in this game is just really fun. There's a lot of flexibility with how you decide to kill people. It's actually really impressive for a game from this time period. You can pick up a barrel of TNT, throw it at a group of people, and shoot it mid-air, exploding it for a massive amount of area of effect damage, and then clean them up with a gun of your choosing. You can grab human shields to soak up a few rounds. You can just trample motherfuckers with your horse in case you want to save some ammo. And if you're feeling real froggy, you can scalp enemies squirming on the ground just waiting to die. It doesn't do anything, there's no mission or objective or reward for this, but it's still an option for you sickos. Alright, let's dive deep into the plot of this game. It's fantastic and really fleshed out, and I will be going into depth here, so spoilers ahead for all those who care. The story of this game is a classic tale of Western revenge, and I love it. You play as Colt White, a hunter who kills game and sells the meat and fur to riverboats along the Missouri River. The game starts with Colt and his father Ned hunting as usual until they're attacked by a grizzly bear that comes out of nowhere. Colt saves his father, luckily before the bear does any substantial damage, just in time for them to hop on the approaching riverboat. On the riverboat, Ned is doing some sketchy shit with one of the prostitutes. You don't really know what's going on, but Colt keeps his nose clean. Before long, some creepy ass preacher named Reverend Josiah Reed throws a tomahawk at the back of the prostitute's head, unleashing an ambush on the riverboat. A battle ensues. You pick off as many men as you can, but it starts to look pretty hopeless. Ned eventually tells Colton to go to Dodge City and find a woman named Jenny before dropping a bomb on him by telling him that he isn't even his real dad, and then he tosses him off of the boat.
God damn it, that's what I'm trying to tell you. I ain't your father. Now go.
Colton gets woken up on the shore by Honest Tom, a man who doesn't live up to his name because after challenging him to a horse race in order to keep his steed, even though Colton wins, Tom and his crew try to kill him anyway, unsuccessfully of course, and then Colton heads on to Dodge City. In Dodge, he goes to the Alhambra, a saloon in Dodge City, to look for Jenny, and when he finds her, she's being accosted by a customer that just wants a poke.
God damn it, girl! How long we gotta wait before we get a proper poke?
This man is named appropriately as Rude, and he's part of the local gang called the Red Hands. Colton deals with them swiftly before his brother Crude shows up and puts up more of a fight and tries to burn the saloon down. In the midst of all this chaos, Jenny says that the creepy preacher came to Dodge not too long ago looking for Sadie, the girl who got tomahawked to the brain, and that he traveled up to Empire City, New Mexico. This gives Colton his next objective. But before he can leave Dodge City, he needs to help fix the bridge because the workers keep getting attacked by Apache Indians. You kill a bunch of Apaches swarming the bridge and successfully get the bridge open to proceed to Empire, getting attacked all along the way by more Apaches of course. Eventually you arrive in Empire City and meet the man in charge, Hoodoo Brown. Based on your swift work with the Apaches and protecting Jenny on the way there, you're quickly deputized by Hoodoo and he promises to help you get your hands on the creepy preacher. Just after it's revealed that there's a resistance gang in the town, led by someone named Chavez E. Chavez. So Colton rolls out with his new deputy bros to put a stop to him. A chase ensues that leads Colton and company to a local ranch, where they turn up empty-handed, but that doesn't stop one of these deputies from killing the innocent ranch owners in cold blood. Colton clearly shocked by this, tries to arrest the deputies, which of course does not go so well, and he's forced to put them down. Riding back to Hoodoo to see what the fuck his deal is, Hoodoo diverts his attention by saying that the preacher is up in his room with Jenny before hearing her scream, arriving just as he slits her throat open with a straight razor. Hoodoo capitalizes on Colton's shock and smashes a bottle on the back of his head, knocking him out. Colton wakes up to the preacher and Hoodoo, as well as a new man sitting in the room, Thomas Magruder, the man responsible for not only Jenny's death, but also the massacre on the steamboat. He clearly has some history with Ned, Colton's fake daddy, as he says he was surprised to see him alive on the steamboat. He wants Colton out of his way permanently, so he wants him hanged in the morning, framing him for the murder of Jenny. Now in jail, Colton wakes up and meets his cellmates, two members of the resistance gang, Port and Soapy. Soapy being a pretty good lockpick and safecracker. The three of them manage to escape the cells and eventually Empire City entirely before riding out to the Resistance hideout where he meets the leader, Clay Allison. Here Colton finds out some more about Magruder and his goals. He learns that Magruder was a Confederate major and that Ned and Clay used to work under him during the Civil War. He is now on the quest for a lost city of gold called Quivira and has torn apart the many states that he's crossed, brutally murdering anyone in his way. Telling the story of how Magruder showed up to a home looking for a man who had been rumored to have been to the lost city. He ruthlessly murders an Apache man for speaking out a line and then shoots Ned in the head for speaking out against that, eventually grabbing a gold cross from the man's house and cutting off his head anyway. A woman comes out with a rifle and shoots at Magruder's head just as he blocks it with the cross. Shrapnel goes into his face and the cross is broken into two pieces. Colton joins up with the Resistance gang with the new goal of killing Thomas Magruder and every person on his payroll. They start by destroying one of Magruder's trains, which they soon discovered being used to transport a car full of captured Apaches being used as slaves. They set them free right as the Apache chief Many Wounds shows up and is like, "Yo, you killed a bunch of my guys at the bridge in Dodge City," and Colton's like, "Well yeah, but now I saved a bunch of people here." This seemingly settles down Many Wounds and he rides away with his people. This whole conversation is in Apache, which Colton finds out he can understand perfectly for some reason. The Resistance boys head back to the hideout and party after a successful mission. However, Magruder's men arrive and capture Clay to take him to Empire City. Colton leads a resistance to Empire in order to rescue Clay and also kill Hoodoo Brown. Colton arrives to find that Clay has been tortured and he's unable to help fight, but he is able to escape to his own men while Colton proceeds to battle Hoodoo. Hoodoo Brown tries to save his own life by revealing that Sadie stored something that Magruder wanted in the safe on the steamboat before the preacher ambushed it, and it's likely still on the boat at the bottom of the river. Colton still proceeds to kill Hoodoo Brown anyways in spectacular fashion.
I'm Hoodoo Brown!
You were.
Now that Hoodoo is dead and Empire City is free from Magruder's control, Colton travels back to Dodge City to meet up with Soapy and find the safe that's been lost in the steamboat crash. Soapy's found himself in a little bit of trouble by cheating at a card game and is quite literally hanging on by a thread before a well-placed shot frees him and the two escape the town on their way to the crash site of the riverboat. While scoping out the crash site, they are captured by some truly frightening men of the Renegade Army, led by Sergeant Hollister. Colton and Soapy are tossed in the stronghold of the army along with a few Native Americans from the Blackfoot tribe, and they eventually sneak out of there, making their way back to the Blackfoot camp to rendezvous. Colton and the Blackfoot chief fights at dawn, then plan on storming the Renegade Army stronghold. They arrive, killing all of the corrupt soldiers, destroying their ammo caches, and chasing down Sergeant Hollister to the shore. Hollister wields Ned's Ferguson rifle and a bunch of dynamite, which he uses to fight Colton to the death. This fight's actually really freaking hard. Hollister takes like no damage and easily kills you by running up on you and killing you with like 3 to 4 shots that he never misses. Even when he's mid-roll, he can still shoot and land his shots. The only way I won was by cheesing him with these long-range shots to the head. After winning the fight, Hollister gives one last-ditch effort to take out Colton by attempted suicide bombing with dynamite, succeeding in only killing himself. With Hollister now in a million pieces, Colton and Soapy make their way to the boat to crack the safe. They get the safe open and discover that it's part of the Golden Cross of Coronado. But of course it isn't going to be that easy. Mr. Creepy Preacher makes his way to the boat as well, being an overall pain in the ass. But luckily, here is where Preacher Reed also meets his end, and probably the best kill in the game.
You king! I'm unarmed! You kill me and your soul will be as cursed as mine!
This is for Jenny.
Colton, after grabbing this piece from the safe, realizes he knows where the other piece is. The Apache chief, Many Wounds, has it. It is also from Many Wounds that Colton fully pieces together the mystery of this game. The same flashback as before is shown, with it being revealed that the boy in the scene is Many Wounds, and it is his father, mother, and healer who were killed by Magruder before he stole the cross from the doctor. Many Wounds hides with a baby, and after standing over all these corpses of his family, Ned, who is surprisingly still alive, walks up and shows shame and apologizes for assisting the madman Magruder. Many Wounds hands him the child and tells him to repay his debt with the baby, raising him to take vengeance on Magruder. That baby is revealed to be Colton. After this revelation, Many Wounds breaks his tomahawk made from the other piece of the Golden Cross and hands it to Colton, and he also tells him where to go to find the true location of the Lost City of Gold. It turns out to be where Magruder has been digging all along, although instead of underground, it is actually within the mountains. This is also where the game was supposed to change courses, according to the writer Randall Jahnson. There's a big part in the script here that was completely cut due to budget and time strains. Colton goes to an entire new area called South World. Colton heads into the Sonoran Desert in Mexico, seeking for more clues regarding the exact location of the City of Gold. He finds an old dust-covered town that led to an epic Sergio Leone spaghetti western style shootout, ending with Colton using dynamite to blow the whole city away. It's kind of a bummer that this never saw the light of day. It's a whole area with a new town and a new unique atmosphere and vibe to it all, completely cut from the game. Anyway, back to what actually did happen. They find the location of the gold in the mountain, and once they find out this location, they're ambushed by Magruder's men and Soapy is captured along with the Golden Cross, eventually giving up the location that they found after getting a few of his fingers obliterated.
You gotta dig up, you damn fool, it's above you!
Of course. Dig up. Up.
Colton meets up with the Resistance militia again and decides to storm the mine that Magruder has been digging in, using one of Magruder's trains to blast their way through the doors. Colton, the resistant group, and the Apache warriors all storm the mine and bring a beatdown to the renegade army, making their way through the mine until eventually confronting Magruder himself inside the Lost City of Gold. He found it after all, but his pleasure is cut short by Colton murking his ass and causing a full-on collapse of the mountain in the process, burying the City of Gold for good, starting with Magruder himself. Colton's saved from the collapse by Many Wounds on his way out of the crumbling city, and they both breathe a sigh of relief. They ended the tyrant, and both of their fathers may now rest in peace. As good as this story is, the amazing characters are the ones that stole the show and made this thing really pop. From the full Hollywood voiceover cast to the incredible writing and motion capture, everything about the characters just worked. They felt alive. Colton is a badass, there's no doubt about it. From saving his pa from an angry grizzly, to staring a gun in the face, remaining cool as a damn cucumber, and even sticking to his own personal morals, even if that means facing off on 2 trained deputies all on his own. Thomas Jane's voice suits Colton so well. Maybe it's because I can't not hear the Punisher when he speaks, but the calm confidence that Jane can portray through voice alone is just perfect for both Frank Castle and a lone man fighting for what's right.
It's too late. That preacher killed her. Son of a bitch is leading the ambush.
The supporting characters are all good as well. Ned White, played by Chris Christopherson, is well acted for his short time on screen. Clay Allison is played by Tom Skerritt. He knocked it out of the park. Soapy, Jenny, Many Wounds, and Fights at Dawn, all fantastic characters that show a ton of heart and depth, even when some of them are only seen for mere minutes across the whole story. And even though Colton and the supporting cast were fantastic, it's the villains of the game that really stole the show. First and foremost, Reverend Josiah Reed, played by Brad Dourif, was incredible. He's such a great villain. He's blinded by his mission and doesn't hesitate to murder in cold blood, particularly when it comes to women that are sex workers. And he uses all kinds of language to show just how he feels about them.
Tell me where it is you want and who.
He's bloodthirsty and misogynistic and just plain old creepy. Brad Dourif does an excellent job delivering the preacher's unique way of speaking.
King, I'm unarmed. You kill me and your soul will be as cursed as mine.
Thomas Magruder, played by Lance Henriksen, was nearly as good as the preacher. Just incredible. He's a savage and tyrant of the entire old frontier and will not let a single person stand in front of him and his objective of finding the lost city of gold. Even speaking out of line in his presence will leave you missing your head. He has such a presence in the cutscenes and he wields so much power over everyone. And as surprising as it is, the boss fight holds his character up to par for how he's portrayed. It's a really tough battle.
Those traitors can't be trusted. You lost it. You get it back. Now go!
Mayor Hoodoo Brown was a favorite of mine. He's the fast-talking mayor of Empire, played by Ron Perlman. He starts off friendly, sweet-talking Jenny and deputizing Colton, but he quickly turns on his heels when it's revealed that he's on Magruder's payroll. This character reminded me a lot of Dutch from the Red Dead Redemption games, a smooth-talking sociopath at its finest. Even visually kinda looks like Dutch.
You son of a bitch!
Commander Hollister and the Renegade Army, Rudabaugh and Webb, all of them played perfect antagonists to Colton and really just stole the show and made the Wild West really feel like a constant battle of good versus evil. A lot of the characters are based on real historical figures as well. Most of them surround the real historic area of Dodge City. Clay Allison was a real gunfighter and Confederate Army veteran that apparently had a run-in with Wyatt Earp in Dodge City at a saloon. His gravestone read, "He never killed a man that did not need killing." Hoodoo Brown was also real. He was the leader of the Dodge City gang, and the hoodoo in the game was based on the real hoodoo's appearance. Other real members of the hoodoo gang were the two deputies in the game, JJ Webb and Dave Rudabaugh. Oddly enough, even though he was the leader of a gang, he was also a mayor in a way, of East Las Vegas in New Mexico. He was the coroner and the mayor after he won an election for Justice of the Peace. However, his position of power was as corrupt and murderous as the criminals that he aimed to go against. Even Magruder was most likely based on John B. Magruder, a Confederate military officer, and Soapy was based on Soapy Smith, a con artist and a gangster. It's really amazing the attention to detail that Neversoft put into everything, even researching real historical people from the Old West and basing several characters around them in an appropriate fashion.
Here, kid, you can have the honors.
Gun ended up selling relatively well. In its first month alone, it sold 225,000 copies across the 4 consoles that it was released on. Overall, it sold 1.4 million copies in the US alone by 2008. It scored pretty decent across the board and was GameSpy's Xbox 360 Action Game of the Year, and it won Computer Games Magazine Award for Best Voice Acting. Not all of this came without controversy though. Playing the game today, it's pretty obvious to see all the crude remarks in the game, particularly to women, Asian cultures, and Native Americans. The Association for American Indian Development actually declared a boycott of this game due to its derogatory, harmful, and inaccurate depictions of Native Americans, bringing up that if a game directed players to kill members of a specific ethnic group, the African Americans, Irish, Mexican, or Jews, it would not be tolerated. But for some reason, killing American Indians is fair game. Activision did release a statement in response, but the game was not altered nor was it removed from any shelves. Activision's statement was, Activision does not condone or advocate any of the atrocities that occurred in the American West during the 1800s. Gun was designed to reflect the harshness of life on the American frontier at that time. It was not Activision's intention to offend any race or ethnic group with Gun, and we apologize to any who might have been offended by the game's depiction of historical events which have been conveyed not only through video games but through films, television programming, books, and other media. So all that's well and good, but what happened to Colt after the events of the game? Will there be a sequel? Again, I have some juicy information straight from the writer of the game, Randall Jahnson. A sequel was in development shortly after the release of Gun, and brainstorming on the game had already begun before Activision pulled the plug on the game, due to Gun not performing as well as they would have liked. From what Randall says, there were two different scenarios in discussion. The first being a prequel surrounding Ned White and Magruder in their early days together as mountain men and serving in the Confederate Army out in New Mexico. The second idea being a sequel, 25 years or so in the future, right around the 1890s and in the conclusion of the Wild West. Colton was going to be the opening of the story, and at this point in time being a marshal somewhere in Oklahoma, and was well into his years at this point as well. Inspired strongly by Bill Tingman. And like good old Bill, Colton was going to die in the line of duty after becoming complacent in his old age. However, his death sparks the story of the sequel. This idea kind of reminds me a lot of the premise to The Last of Us 2, and I can totally see it being badass. Like maybe Colton had a kid to avenge him, or a deputy that saw him as a father. I don't know, but I wish I could have this game one day. He also goes on to mention some other ideas for a prequel that he had thought up involving Civil War guerrillas, like the origins of the James and Younger gangs. Another very cool idea. But unfortunately, as we all know, there is no sequel in the works, and there are no plans for the game to ever be visited again. It's super cool to hear that Neversoft did want to keep this game alive, and they wanted to advance this story even further in a really thoughtful and meaningful way, even though we will never get to experience this ourselves. I want to give a big thank you again to Carter for providing this interview with Randall to me. He did it all on his own volition, and because he's a massive fan of the game and he wanted to know more information. And I'm stoked that he shared it with me, and I'm able to share it with you. Show some love to him on Twitter and go and say thank you. And even though we got no direct sequel, it's clear to see the inspiration that Gun was to bigger games in the genre, namely Red Dead Redemption in 2010. It's quite literally a game made off the combination of Gun and Red Dead Revolver. I gotta say, I'm glad you guys bullied me into playing this game. I can only imagine how mind-blowing this game must have been in 2005. It's still super impressive even today, playing it for the first time 16 years after its release. The story alone is worth taking a shot at if you haven't, but even the gunplay holds up and it's a ton of fun. It's a relatively short game and it's available right now on PC on GOG. I'll leave an affiliate link in the description, and like I said earlier, for the first 10 days after this video is uploaded, you get 72% off on GOG, so go check that out. It gets you a dope ass game and it gives me a little kickback if you buy it through GOG. I'd also like to take this time to give a thank you to my patrons. If you'd like to support me on Patreon, the link is in the description. As always, thank you for watching. I hope to see you next time. Peace.
Welcome aboard the Kill Magruder Express. Next stop, end of the line.